السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we are continuing with the fiqh of worship. The last thing we talked about was Sunan al-Fitra. And Sunan al-Fitra, as we remember, that these Sunan are not just something revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, but it's from one messenger to the other. And we talked about the siwak and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ with that talks about Sunnah al-Fitra in general, and growing the beard and shaving the pubic hair, and also using perfume and taking care of one's hair, changing the gray hair for those who have gray hair, and to avoid the black color. And this is a subject that comes before the talk about the wudu, because this is part of the cleanliness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, and the samt, or the outside appearance, that is recommended for the Muslim to observe at all times. Then after that, we talk inshallah ta'ala about the wudu that we do many times every day. And we always have to remember the different rulings of wudu, because we are in need of it, and it's a mandatory part of knowledge. The word al-wudu, is the definition of it is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by using pure water in a specific way. So wudu is not just about being clean, because this is a clear evidence that linguistic meanings of the words or the terminologies or matters of deen is not sufficient. We have to go by what it's defined religiously by the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And so when we about to make salah, or when we want to make salah, or hold a mushaf, or specific actions like making tawaf around the Kaaba, we have to be in state of wudu. We have to be in state of tahara. And we talked about the water, that it has to be pure, and we have to be in state of purification, and we have to be clean from any impurities. So to be in state of purity or purification or tahara, a person has to be in a state of wudu. And the wudu is one of the very virtuous actions. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said in the authentic hadith, and it's reported by Imam Muslim and others, إِذَا تَوَضَّأَ الْعَبْدُ الْمُسْلِمُ أو المؤمن فغسل وجهه خرج من وجهه كل خطيئة نظر إليها بعينيه مع الماء أو مع آخر قطر الماء. If the Muslim slave of Allah, he makes wudu, or the mu'min. Prophet ﷺ said that the Muslim or the mu'min, and when the Muslim and the mu'min are both mentioned in the same context, that means one is of a higher iman than the other. So, and because the wudu is mandatory, of course, and this is something that every Muslim has to make salah. So when a Muslim or a mu'min or a believer makes wudu, so he washes his face, which is part of making wudu, comes out from his face every sin that he did by looking with his eyes. The sin will come out with the water, or with the last drop of water, where it drips from his face. فَإِذَا غَسَلَ يَدَيْهِ, then if he washes his hand, all of the sins that comes out from his hand, كَانَ بَطَشَتْهَا يَدَيْهِ, anything that he did commit a sin with his hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would remove the sin by the water, or by the last drop of water that drips from his hand. فَإِذَا غَسَلَ رِجْلَيْهِ خَرَجَتْ كُلُّ خَطِيئَةٍ مَشَتْهَا رِجْلَهِ, and if he washes his foot, all of the sins that his foot walked to will be washed away with the water, or with the last drop of water. حَتَّى يَخْرُجَ نَقِيًّا مِنَ الذُّنُوبِ, till he goes out, or he's done with the wudu, purified from all sins. So this is a great virtue of the wudu. And that's why, even though it is not mandatory for a person to repeat the wudu for every salah, if you have wudu, you can pray the next salah, right? But we have to make sure that we have wudu. But as some of the ulama, they say, but if someone has been involved into some Of course, if it's direct sin, of course, a person should definitely repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make wudu. But if he was involved in maybe busy with work or doing something that he, might saw something, might did something. So one of the good things to do is to renew the wudu, even though he does not have to make wudu. It's only recommended because of this hadith and the like of it. And to be in state of wudu always is a great deed. لا يحافظ على الوضوء إلا مؤمن. Prophet ﷺ said, only a believer would guard his wudu. And this is not something difficult for those who do not have a special ailment or a condition or so. To be in wudu, every time a person uses the bathroom, for example, make wudu right after you're done with that. If it's easy, to be always in state of wudu. It helps you if you want to read Quran, if you want to make salah. Just to be in a state of wudu, this is by itself is a good deed. To be in that state, it's a good deed, even though it's not mandatory, again, to be always in state of wudu. Since we're talking about the fiqh of the wudu, the niyyah, or having the intentions of making wudu, this is a pillar of the wudu. You have to have intentions. Because if someone, it happened that he cleaned himself, even though for wudu, it's very difficult to see someone that would make wudu without a niyyah. You don't have, the niyyah is in the heart. You don't say anything. You don't even say anything with your heart. It's already known that you know what you're doing. It's only needed maybe for something like, or to stress the importance of it, and something like ghusl, taking a shower, for example. You have to have the niyyah that this is an act of purification to be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because people might take showers out of a habit, so it's not valid unless a person has the proper niyyah for it. But for the wudu, still also the niyyah is mandatory, it's a pillar, and it's, the intentions of making wudu. And of course, comes with it the ikhlas, the sincerity of intention, seeking rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Before we say how we make wudu, since it's a subject of fiqh, so the subject of fiqh will talk about the obligatory actions, the recommended actions, things like this. So what are the furud, or the mandatory things in wudu? There are 6 things. There are 6 things. 6 obligations for wudu, right? And even though you know how to make wudu, please write them down. So, furud al-wudu, the obligations of wudu, to wash the face. We're not talking about how to make wudu in a chronological order. We're just talking about how, or what are the obligatory things in wudu. To wash the face. And with it, when you're washing the face, part of that is to make al-madmada wal-istinshaq. Putting the water inside of the mouth and then spit it out, and then al-istinshaq, the nose, where you take the water in and then you push it out. That's part of of washing the face. Al-wajh. And al-wajh, what is the wajh? The face, where you face people with, right? And it's not the head, it's not the entire head, it's the face. So the face is what's known to everyone. It's where the hair usually grow, all the way to the bottom of the chin, and from one ear to the other, to make sure that the different parts of the face is washed and the water reached it. So this is the fard. How to make wudu? We're still not talking about that 3 times and so on. So this is washing the face. So the water has to cover the face. Number 2, غسل اليدين, to wash the hands مع المرفقين, with the elbows. And by the way, when we say ghasl, when we say washing, right, what constitutes washing? The water has to run, right? So it's different than wiping. Wiping is your hands is wet and you wipe over your body organ. But washing, the water has to run on it. Doesn't have to be running on the entire part of the wudu, but once it runs, and then you can use your hand to rub it all over the part that you're making wudu. This is sufficient. But as long as there was some water running on your hands, on your face, so it doesn't have to be lots of water. So as long as there's some water running on the face, then with your hands, you would cover the entire face with water. So this is what ghasl. So washing the face, and from it is also the madmada wal istinshaq, the mouth and the nose. غسل اليدين مع المرفقين, to wash the hands with the elbows. The elbows are part of what has to be washed. The sunnah is to go further up. This is what is recommended. We're talking about the fard. And why we're saying fard? Because if you miss it, that means you did not make wudu. That's the importance of that. Not just that we would just do the fard. So غسل اليدين مع المرفقين. Number 3, to wipe the head. ومنه الأذنان, and part of the head is the 2 ears. 2 ears are part of the head. And wiping as a rule is only 1 time. This is what's recommended, what's obligatory. So wiping the head. The entire head, yes. We're not talking about differences of opinions. We're just talking about what we should do, inshallah. So wiping the entire head, and we'll talk about what's the recommended way to do that. So wiping the head is an obligation, and part of that is the 2 ears. Number 4, washing the 2 foot إلى الكعبين, to the ankle. Al-Ka'b is the ankle, which is that bone that separates the foot from the shin. So that means it's not the heels, but above. To wash the leg, the foot, to the Ka'bayn, to the ankles, making sure also that this is all washed and between the toes and so on. Number 5, to do that in order, to do these specific 4 things in that particular order. So the face, then the hands to the elbows, then wiping the head, then washing the foot. Has to be done in that order, because the verses in the Quran talked about them as in that specific order, so it has to be done in that order. So if someone did one before the other, then he continue from where he last thing he did, and then to repeat it again, to make sure that the order is done. And number 6, the last pillar of wudu, something they call it al-muwalah. Al-muwalah, which means that it's done, meaning all of the wudu is done together without separating it with time or so. So the word muwalah, when you do something one after the other without separating it with a long period of time. What's the word for it in English that they use? To do something in a sequence without giving too much time. So basically the muwalah means that if you're making wudu and after you washed your face, you received a phone call. So you answered your phone and you talked on the phone and you stopped the wudu, of course. And then after you're done, can you continue where you stopped? Or you have to start the wudu from the beginning? The muwalah being a fard in wudu, if that talk was, it's a conversation, and the last part of your body that you washed in wudu would dry in normal environment condition, then you have to repeat the wudu from the beginning. And what's even more correct is if it's urfan, meaning that it seems like you stopped the wudu, you're done with the wudu. If it's answering, I'm busy now, can you call me later, and you hanged up the phone, that's okay, you can continue the wudu. But if it's you start talking and back and forth and taking your time, then you have to start over the wudu. Something that if someone looking at you from a distance, they would say that he quit making wudu. That means you have to start it over again. And that's also if someone that you go out of the bathroom, or you go you stop making wudu in the middle of the wudu to get something done, or you heard something, you want to open the door, for example, or something like this. Interruption. Right? Interruption is the opposite of the muwalah. The continuous, mashallah, jazakumullah khair. The continuous way of making wudu. So the continuity of the wudu. This is the muwalah. At one time, it's one session. Right? If there is a small portion of time that you did something in between, there's no harm, as long as you look like you're still in that process of making wudu. So there's no specific thing with time or anything. That's why the ulama, they talked about the issue of the last part of the wudu is not dried according to the normal conditions, just to make it easy for people to get to know what the continuity of it. But it's easy to be known with urf. So these are the 6 pillars of wudu. You wrote it down, inshallah ta'ala. Washing the face, and from it, part of that is the mouth and the nose, and washing the hands with the elbows, wiping the head, the entire head, and the 2 ears are part of that, washing the foot to the ankles, and to do that in that particular order, and to do it in a continuous way. So 6 obligations in wudu. As far as sunan al-wudu, or the recommended acts of wudu, the intentions and saying Bismillah, intentions it depends on how the ulama, they classify the intentions. Some of them, they make it a pillar, and some they make it a condition for the wudu. But it's a differences that doesn't make any difference in the ruling of the intentions. So intentions has to be done. If there's no intentions, there's no wudu, there's no act of worship. So we talked about the intention in the beginning. So you can say that intentions is a pillar of wudu, or you can say that intentions is a condition for the wudu. Both statements, the outcome of it is the same. That means you have to have intentions. When it comes to the saying Bismillah, right, the Jumhur of Ahl Ilm, that saying Bismillah is recommended, and it's not a mandatory or a pillar of the wudu, of course, but it's mandatory for, if the hadith is sound, as Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he said, la wudu liman lam yusammi Allah. So we didn't talk yet about how to make wudu in the perfect way. So definitely not to miss Bismillah, not to miss Bismillah whatsoever before we make the wudu. But we're talking mainly about the pillars that are mentioned in the verse of the Quran, and then we'll talk about the different aspects of things also to be done in wudu, inshallah. Before we continue with the questions, but even though, okay, you're talking about the mu'ala, is it permissible to talk to someone while making wudu? It's okay to talk to someone while making wudu, and if it's needed, and it's best to focus on the wudu. And the Prophet ﷺ, even though someone might say that the Prophet ﷺ, when someone spoke to him, he did not reply till he finished the wudu, and he said that he wanted to be on tahara. But talking during the wudu does not negate the wudu, right? So it's if it's done even when a person is talking, there is no harm whatsoever, as far as the validity of the wudu is mentioned. As far as some of the ulama, they mentioned the karaha in this, right? And the karaha is, or some had mentioned the karaha because that it makes the person busy, not focused on what he's doing, and he's getting himself ready for the salah and things like this. And he might, when talking, it might be a means for waswas. That means a person, after he finished the wudu, he would say, did I wash my foot? Did I wash my hands? So the shaitan would whisper to him. Why? Because he was busy while he was making the wudu. So, but it's okay. It does not invalidate it.